This is the story of revenge on a cheating wife who gave her lover oral attention under the table at a restaurant. I always thought my life was stable, predictable in the best way. I worked hard to provide for Emma and our 10-year-old son, Josh. Sure, it wasn't a perfect life, but it was ours. Family dinners, lazy Sundays, and movie nights. It was the kind of life I thought people should be grateful for. I was grateful for it. I never imagined how quickly it could all start falling apart. It began so subtly that I didn't even notice at first. Emma started coming home later than usual, saying she had more work responsibilities. I was proud of her. She'd always been ambitious, and I liked seeing her thrive. But then she started dressing differently for these late nights. She began wearing the perfume I gave her last Christmas, the one she hadn't touched in months. I told myself I was overthinking it. I mean, who wouldn't want to look good for work? But she stopped sharing things with me, the kind of everyday moments we used to talk about. When I'd ask how her day was, she'd brush me off with short, vague answers. And then there was her phone. I noticed how she'd smile at her screen, laugh softly at messages she never showed me. I'm not proud of it, but I asked once, "What's so funny?" "Oh, just work stuff," she said with a dismissive shrug. She didn't even look at me when she said it. Work stuff. That's all it ever was, according to her. But it started eating away at me. At night, I'd lie awake while she slept peacefully beside me, wondering what the hell was going on. I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. Still, I didn't want to believe it was anything serious. Maybe it was just a phase. Maybe I was reading too much into it. I convinced myself that everything would go back to normal eventually. Then came the Friday night that changed everything. I'd just met up with an old friend, Tim, for coffee. We hadn't seen each other in ages, and I thought it would be a good distraction from the mess in my head. We were sitting by the window of a little cafe downtown, reminiscing about our college days when I saw her, Emma. She stepped out of a car in front of the restaurant across the street. She was wearing this sleek black dress, one I didn't even know she owned. My first thought was, she looks beautiful. My second thought hit me like a punch to the gut. What is she doing here? And then I saw him. A tall, well-dressed man got out of the car after her. He walked around to her side and placed his hand on her back as they headed toward the entrance. She looked up at him with this smile, a smile I hadn't seen in years. My stomach twisted into a knot. "Michael, you okay?" Tim's voice barely registered. "Yeah," I mumbled, already standing up. "I just remembered something I need to take care of. I'll call you later." I don't even know what excuse I gave him. My body was moving on autopilot as I crossed the street. I stopped in front of the restaurant's window, peering in like a damn spy in a bad movie. There they were, sitting in a booth near the back. She was laughing at something he said. Her head tilted slightly, her hand resting lightly on his forearm. My pulse was pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. What the hell was I supposed to do? Go in there and confront her? Call her? Make a scene? I felt frozen, like the whole world had come crashing down, and I was standing in the rubble. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. I snapped a few photos through the glass. Blurry, but enough to prove I wasn't imagining things. That's when I saw it. Emma slid out of the booth, disappearing under the table. My heart stopped as I watched the man shift in his seat, his legs moving slightly. My brain couldn't fully process what I was seeing. It was absurd. It was grotesque. It was her. I staggered back, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The world around me blurred as I turned and walked away. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced myself to keep moving. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away. Eventually, I ended up at some dingy bar, the kind of place I hadn't set foot in since my early 20s. I ordered a whiskey, then another. I don't remember how many I had, just that no amount of alcohol could erase what I'd just seen. When I finally got home, it was past midnight. The house was dark. I crept upstairs, trying not to wake Josh. Emma was already in bed, her face serene in the soft glow of the bedside lamp. I stood in the doorway staring at her. How could she look so peaceful, so normal after what she'd done? I felt sick, but I also felt something else, something colder, sharper. I was going to find out everything. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and the taste of stale whiskey in my mouth. The events of the previous night came rushing back like a flood. For a brief second, I thought maybe it had all been a dream, but then I saw my phone on the bedside table. I grabbed it and opened the gallery. There they were, blurry, shaky photos of Emma and that man. Proof. I felt a wave of nausea as I stared at the images, the weight of everything settling heavily in my chest. I couldn't stay in bed. I couldn't lie there, next to her, pretending everything was fine. Quietly, I got up, threw on some clothes, and left the house. I didn't even know where I was going. I drove aimlessly for over an hour, my thoughts spinning in a relentless loop. Who was he? How long had this been going on? Why? What had I done or failed to do that made her feel like this was okay? By the time I pulled into the parking lot of a small diner, I was no closer to an answer. I ordered coffee I didn't drink. Staring out the window as I replayed every interaction I'd had with Emma over the past few months, the distance, the excuses, the laughter at her phone, it all made sense now. How could I have been so blind? I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I knew better. If I went in unprepared, she'd find a way to twist things, make me question what I saw, what I knew. Emma was good at that. She always had been. I needed more than blurry photos. If I was going to hold her accountable, I needed undeniable proof. When I got home, Emma was in the kitchen humming softly as she made breakfast. The smell of coffee and eggs filled the air, a scene so normal it felt surreal. She glanced up at me as I walked in. "Morning," she said brightly, like nothing was wrong. "You were up early. Where'd you go?" "Just for a drive," I muttered, avoiding her gaze. She didn't press further. Of course she didn't. Emma never asked too many questions unless it directly concerned her. I sat at the table, forcing myself to eat while she chatted about Josh's upcoming soccer practice, a work event she had next week, and some new restaurant she wanted to try. Her voice was light casual, but every word grated on me. How could she act like everything was normal? Like she wasn't tearing our marriage apart? The rest of the day passed in a blur. I barely spoke to her, too consumed by my own thoughts. By the time night fell, I had made up my mind. I waited until she went to bed before I made my move. Emma had always been careless with her phone. She didn't bother with complicated passwords or lock screens. For years, I'd seen this as a sign of trust, a way of saying we had nothing to hide from each other. Now it felt like a cruel irony. Her phone was on the coffee table charging. I picked it up, my hands trembling slightly, and swiped it open. The first thing I checked was her messages. At first, nothing seemed unusual, just conversations with her sister coworkers and the group chat she had with some of the moms from Josh's soccer team. But then I saw it, a thread with someone saved under the name Melissa. I opened it and my chest tightened. The messages weren't from a Melissa. They were from him. The thread was filled with flirty banter, inside jokes, and plans to meet up. I scrolled further, my stomach churning with each new revelation. One message read, "Last night was magical. Can't stop thinking about your surprise under the table." Another said, "Same time next week. I can't wait to see you again." There were even photos, selfies of them together, laughing, her hand on his chest. My fingers clenched around the phone as I stared at the screen, the bile rising in my throat. I put the phone down, pacing the living room as I tried to process everything. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the fact that she hadn't even tried to hide it. She must have thought I was so oblivious, so trusting that I'd never find out. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in the darkened living room, staring at nothing, my mind racing with possibilities. Confront her now? Wait, how would she react? By morning, I had a plan. When Emma woke up, I acted like everything was normal. I kissed her on the cheek, asked if she wanted coffee, and went about my usual routine. She didn't suspect a thing. Over the next few days, I started gathering more evidence. I checked her phone whenever I had the chance, taking screenshots of messages and photos. I reviewed our bank statements, finding charges for expensive dinners and hotel stays that she had never mentioned. Every discovery was another knife in my chest, but I couldn't stop. I needed it all. Then I made an appointment with a divorce lawyer. I didn't tell her. I didn't hint at what I was planning. I wanted everything in place before I dropped the bomb. When the day finally came, I waited until Josh was at school. Emma was in the kitchen again, scrolling through her phone as she sipped her coffee. "Emma," I said, my voice steady. She looked up, her brow furrowing slightly. "What's up?" I placed my phone on the table, and the screen displaying one of the photos I'd taken of her and the man at the restaurant. Her eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly. "What's this?" she asked, her tone defensive. "You tell me," I replied, crossing my arms, "because it looks like my wife is sneaking around behind my back." She scoffed, leaning back in her chair. "Oh, come on, Michael, don't be dramatic. He's just a friend." "A friend," I said bitterly. Does your friend know how much you like surprising him under the table? Her face turned red, not with shame, but with anger. How dare you go through my phone? She snapped. That's a complete invasion of privacy. Privacy, I shot back. You mean the privacy you used to betray me and destroy our marriage? Don't turn this on me, Emma. I'm not the one sneaking around. Her expression hardened, a cold smirk forming on her lips. Fine, she said. You're right, I've been seeing him. But let's not pretend you're some perfect husband. Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me. Stop, I interrupted, my voice sharp. Don't you dare try to blame this on me. Her smirk grew. Go ahead, Michael. Leave me. But don't think for a second you're walking away unscathed. I'll take the house, the car, Josh. You'll be paying for this for the rest of your life. For a moment, her words left me stunned. Then I smiled. We'll see about that. The smirk on Emma's face lingered, as if she believed she had already won. She leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed, and studied me with a mix of disdain and confidence. It was as if she expected me to fold, to retreat, to let her have her way, like I always had in the past. But this time I wasn't backing down. Emma, I said, my tone calm, almost cold, you've underestimated me. For once, I'm not the fool you think I am. Her confidence faltered for just a second, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face before she recovered. You're making a big mistake, Michael. A divorce? Really? Do you have any idea what that will cost you? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I simply turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her to stew in her own arrogance. I didn't tell her I had already met with a lawyer. I didn't mention that I'd compiled all the evidence, photos, screenshots, bank statements, and handed them over to a professional who assured me we had a strong case. I didn't tell her that I had already made plans to secure the house and full custody of Josh. Let her think she had the upper hand for now. It would make the fall that much sweeter. Over the next few weeks, things were tense, but strangely quiet. Emma avoided me as much as possible, staying out late more frequently and barely speaking to me when she was home. I let her. The more rope she had, the more she'd hang herself with it. Josh, thankfully, was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing between us. I made sure to keep things normal for him, helping with homework, taking him to soccer practice, and planning movie nights just for the two of us. He didn't need to see the cracks forming in our family, not yet. One evening while Emma was out, I sat in the living room going over the final draft of the divorce paperwork. My lawyer had been thorough, outlining everything we'd need to present in court to ensure the best outcome for me and Josh. It wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about protecting my son from a woman who had shown she was willing to put her own selfish desires above her family. When Emma came home that night, she barely glanced at me as she walked past. I caught a faint whiff of perfume. Something floral and cloying, not the scent she usually wore. My jaw tightened as I watched her disappear upstairs. She was becoming bolder, more reckless. But that only played into my hands. The breaking point came a few days later. It was a Saturday morning, and Emma was in the kitchen pouring herself a cup of coffee like she didn't have a care in the world. I walked in, the divorce papers in hand, and set them down on the table in front of her. What's this? She asked, her tone casual as she glanced at the papers. Divorce. I said simply. Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me. You're serious? Completely. Emma laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. You really think you can just walk away from this? From me? You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, Michael. Actually, I said, leaning against the counter, I think I have a pretty good idea. See, I've been preparing for this. I've spoken to a lawyer. I've gathered evidence, and I'm ready for whatever you throw at me. Her laughter stopped abruptly. For the first time, I saw genuine anger in her eyes. Evidence? She repeated, her voice low and dangerous. I nodded. Photos, messages, bank statements, everything I need to prove infidelity in court. So go ahead, Emma. Try to take the house. Try to take Josh. I dare you. Her face twisted into a snarl, her composure slipping. You think you've got it all figured out, don't you? You think you can just walk away and leave me with nothing? I'll fight you, Michael. I'll fight you until you regret ever meeting me. I didn't flinch. Do what you have to do, but just know I'm not the same man you've been walking all over, not anymore. Emma stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, the adrenaline pumping through my veins. It was the first real confrontation we'd had since this whole mess began, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. True to her word, Emma didn't make things easy. She dragged the divorce proceedings out for months, filing counterclaims and demanding outrageous settlements. She tried to paint me as a neglectful husband, even going so far as to suggest I wasn't fit to have custody of Josh. But my lawyer and I were prepared. Every lie she told was countered with cold, hard evidence. The photos, the messages, the financial records. It all painted a clear picture of her betrayal and selfishness. The day we finally went to court was one of the most exhausting days of my life. Emma sat across from me, her expression cold and calculating, while her lawyer spun a web of half-truths and exaggerations. But when it was our turn, my lawyer systematically dismantled her claims, presenting the evidence with precision and professionalism. By the end of the proceedings, it was clear which way the judge was leaning. When the ruling came, it was like a weight had been lifted off my chest. The house was mine, full custody of Josh was granted to me, with Emma allowed only supervised visitation. Her attempts to secure alimony were denied thanks to the evidence of her infidelity. As we left the courtroom, Emma turned to me, her face pale with rage. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "But this isn't over, Michael. I'll make you pay for this." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The fallout from the divorce hit Emma hard. Word of her actions spread quickly, and it wasn't long before she lost her job. Her lover, whoever he was, disappeared the moment things got messy, leaving her to deal with the consequences alone. As for me, I focused on rebuilding. Life wasn't easy, but it was peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. I poured my energy into being the best father I could be for Josh, creating a stable, loving home for the two of us. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Josh leaned against me and said, "I'm glad it's just us now, Dad. It feels better this way." I smiled, ruffling his hair. "Me too, buddy." For the first time in a long time, I felt free.